Hello everybody, welcome to the next video on John Brown by Bob Dylan. In this video we will discuss about the poem and a little bit about the background of the poem in two parts so that it becomes easier for you to understand when you start writing your answers and as you read the poem also. So first, in the first part, before I start on with the poem, I will talk about little bit about the background and some themes, and also the poetic devices that is present in John Brown that Bob Dylan has used here. This poem is written by the American singer songwriter, and he was also the Nobel laureate. His name is, as you understand, is Bob Dylan from the very title and this page itself. Known for upholding the American folk music and his deep rooted sense of pacifism, most of his works are seen to be highly influenced by the poets of modernism and beatnik movements. However, getting back to the poem or the song, as one may call it, because you may refer to it both as a poem and a song. But while writing your answers, you may stick to the format as you may call it as poems only, so that it becomes easier for you to write and not get confused. As one may call it, it consists of 12 verses and does not follow any typical poetic meters. The primary themes of the poem is war and its horrors and the false notion of the glory and the bravado, as one understands this as an anti-war song or the poem. You will see that the poem, through its colloquial diction, interrogates the ideas of war, honor, and masculinity and shows what happens when people go to fight a good old-fashioned war. This is a very strong expression that you will find here in this poem. Instead of deifying and romanticizing, deifying means worshipping it as an idol, where everything you see it to be good, something or someone to be worshipped. So instead of deifying and romanticizing, this anti-war poem shows the realistic details of the kind of horror and the senseless death that a war causes. In this poem, stamping no time or location, Dylan brings out the universality of the theme. So here in this poem, there is absolutely no mention of the time, no mention of the location where exactly this battle is being fought or from where John Brown actually belongs to. It is something that is universal, and this universality is something that appeals to the readers. The poem does not really show the reason for going to the war, suggesting that in some cases there never is a reasonable reason for waging a war. So why do we wage a war? What is it? It is just for some selfish needs, for some so-called glories that one craves for. Though if we discuss about the necessity of war and why one needs to go into war in spite of its hatred or dislike, as you understand here in India, the present scenario with our neighboring countries, that is something of a controversial and near a war-like situation. We are quite near like a war-like situation. Who is responsible exactly for it? And if I get into the details of talking into the exact reasons of this condition or the warlike situation, probably we will enter into a huge controversy and lots of doubts and cross conversations and debates and a number of things, and we will deviate from our primary topic, which is the poem by Bob Dylan. So probably if you have any ideas and any thoughts regarding this war and the anti-war theme and why it is necessary and why it is not necessary to wage a war or participate in a war, you are very much welcome to comment in the comment section, and we may talk loads about it, and sometime even we may talk about it in our next video session or whatever you are comfortable with. But for the time being, let's stick on to the poem. And as I was saying, that there is not even a reasonable reason for waging a war, because wars ultimately result in further wars, and hence the futility. So if it does not even lead to war on the physical level, obviously there is a war on the mental level, because you continuously fight with your hunger. You're continuously waging a war against your daily wages. You're continuously waging a war against your job, and you name it, your mental peace, you name it, and you have it. And what does it result into? Because the war on the physical level, on the battleground, has these kind of larger impacts that result in larger wars. Right, so now we are moving on to the poetic devices, because it is very essential that I discuss these poetic devices beforehand, so that as we go and read this poem after this, you will be able to understand it more clearly. Okay, so the poetic devices, first I'll talk about the alliteration. Now, what is an alliteration? It is the close repetition of the consonant sounds in a sentence. The instances of alliteration in this poem or song, as you may call it, are to fight on a foreign shore. To fight on a foreign shore, you may note it. And the second one is he stood straight. The third one is that I was just a puppet in a play. So there are three examples: to fight on a foreign shore, he stood straight, and that I was just a puppet in the play. Now the next is exclamation. Exclamation, as you understand from the very word itself, is an expression of sudden cry or remark expressing strong emotions or surprise. Like, oh Lord, this is very much evident in the poem, we will understand it very soon. Oh Lord, not even recognize his face. This is one. Another is, while she couldn't even recognize his face. And the third one is, oh Lord, just like mine. These are very strong exclamatory sentences, and it hits you hard. Okay, the next is repetition. Now, what is a repetition? It is a literary device that is used to repeat the same words or phrases in order to emphasize an idea. Now, what is this idea, or what are these ideas that are emphasized here in this poem? First is, oh Lord, not even recognize his face. Second is, oh Lord, just like mine. So, two instances of repetition. First is, oh Lord, not even recognize his face, and the second is, oh Lord, just like mine. Now, the final one is irony. Irony is that expression where you try to express one thing, but exactly it means the opposite. The instance of irony can be seen in the last stanza, the last paragraph of this poem. You will get to that soon in my next, the second part of this video. In the first part, I will be discussing the first half, and in the second part, the second half, and the rest of the poem will be discussed in details. In both the halves it will be discussed in details, and you will find the links of each of the other in the description section, so that it becomes easier for you to refer while writing your answers and while understanding the poem also. So here, what is the irony? The poem begins with an enthusiastic and positive note, and his mother, his here refers to John Brown's mother, is extremely proud of him. And ironically, when John returns from home, where she was bragging all about him, she was boasting about her son. Ironically, when John returns from the war, he hands over the medals to his mother, but his condition is pathetic. The medal that was supposed to bring joy and pride to his mother only served to leave his mother in shock. So instead of glory, it only brought distress, as I have mentioned in the latter half also. Okay, so now we will head straight into the poem without wasting any more time. Okay. John Brown went off to war to fight on a foreign shore. His mamma sure was proud of him. He stood straight and tall in his uniform and all. His mamma's face broke out all in a grin. Oh son, you look so fine. I am glad you are a son of mine. You make me proud to know you hold a gun. Do what the captain says. Lots of medals you will get, and we'll put them on the wall when you come home. So in the first line itself, we are introduced to the titular hero of the poem. Titular hero, the title. the title of the name that is there in the title, he himself is the hero. It is not being spoken about, he himself is the hero, and it is about him, it centers around him. Okay, now the foreign shore in the first line. John Brown went off to war to fight on a foreign shore. Foreign shore here refers to the distant land. The namelessness of the place suggests that a war is a war and the devastation would be the same everywhere. It does not matter that the devastation will be less in place A and will be greater in place B. The loss of life, property, and you name it, and whatever the loss is, it will be the same everywhere. His mama Mama sure was proud of him. Proud of what? To see John Brown stand straight and tall in his uniform, new and crisp, and he looked all primed. His mother was reeling with pride. So his tall stature, his erect posture, and his uniform with holding his gun and everything, it looked absolutely prim and proper for his mother, and she was extremely proud of that. His mama's face broke out all in a grin. So this pride resulted in a grin. She was extremely happy. Oh son, you look so fine. I am glad you are a son of mine. So the mother is proud of her soldier son going to the war front, and like a brave son or man ought to behave, here as if John Brown is meeting the set standards of the masculinity. The son of mine, he actually has behaved like a true son is expected to behave, or would everyone would love to be love one to behave. The set standards of masculinity is met by John Brown, and this set standards is set by whom? Is set by his mother. And this is evident in the very next line too, as you will see. You make me proud to know you hold a gun. She is an expression to the mindset of the people of the era who associated the grandeur to the official possession of the gun. So holding a gun is something as a matter of pride, something that defines your masculinity, something that defines your courage, your strength, stamina, and you whatever you may call it. Two things are here mentioned here, this make me proud and do what the captain says, lots of medals you will get it. This is very important. Two things are expressed here. I have mentioned it in one here as A and the other here as B. Okay, so the first is her pride, which is displayed in her grin, shows that she is sure that her son will return from the war front, which in turn is indicative of either a motherly optimism for her son or a complete ignorance of the realities of the war on her part. And the second is the splendor that the political propagandists had so craftily gilded the soldiership with, that in turn made his mother reel with admiration that resulted in a wide grin. So it may be the two things, that her mother was probably living in a fool's paradise where everything was supposed to be normal. It was just a war, a boys game, a kids game, where they will fight and everything will be resolved, and like we used to do in our childhood days, and then after the matter is solved, everyone will get back to their places and life will be as usual. But that is not the case. And the second is the amount of impact that these politicians, their propagandas have in the minds of the citizens of the country, or the citizens of the nation, because they are so made to think of the grandeur and something that war is something that is so glorious, that gives you glory and marks one of, it is actually the set standard that marks one of its valor. It is so something that has been so compared to be as something so heroic a deed that the people, and the mother being the face or the mouthpiece of those people, reel with admiration, and that results in a wide grin, and will put them on the wall when you come home. So the expression of glory is to be found in the medals. And how will John Brown get the medal? John Brown will get the medal once he follows the orders of his general. Now we will move on to the next part. As that old train pulled out, John's ma began to shout, telling everyone in the neighborhood, "That's my son. That's about to go. He's a soldier now, you know." She made well sure her neighbors understood. She got a letter once in a while, and her face broke in a smile as she showed them to the people from next door. And she bragged about her son with his uniform and gun, and these things you called a good old-fashioned war. Oh, good old-fashioned war. So this expression has been used twice. This is very important. So as the old train pulled out, this line suggests that it is the beginning of John's training, and the training and the idea of war both is old-fashioned and traditional. Telling everyone in the neighborhood, that's my son that's about to go. He's a soldier now, you know. So in these lines, where she's expressing her happiness and boasting about her son to her neighbors, in these lines, the romanticization of the war and the valor finds expression in the mother's boastful expression, in the mother's boastful proclamation that her son is now a soldier and he is holding a gun. The hint, the soldier now, you know, again at the hint of the masculinity, because he is going there to show off his strength as a man. He has become a man. She got a letter once in a while, and her face broke into a smile as she showed them to the people from next door. So the romanticization finds expression again in these lines, and not only it is the letter that a sign of communication, it is also a sign of his courage, strength, training and sacrifice. Because due to his training, it is he is not being able to send in the letters regularly. It is only once in a while that he is being able to communicate with her, and that is in turn that again makes her proud. As she showed them to the people from next door. People from next door, as you understand, refers to the neighbors. And she bragged about her son with his uniform and gun. This line suggests that how happy she is, that John is out there only to satisfy her vanity. What is her vanity? That her son will win medals and she will decorate the wall with those glorious medals. At the cost of what? That is we are going to understand and realize as we reach the end of the poem. To please the captain and bring loads of medals. So at the cost of something very valuable, something that is dear, just by respecting and following the orders of the general, he will be able to win medals and bring glory to his mother and the family, and his wall would be decorated. And these things you called a good old-fashioned war. The mocking tone of the poet is very strikingly evident here, and it does not escape the reader's eyes as we understand what he is trying to tell. Oh, good old-fashioned war. So the mocking tone here, as we understand, is that there is nothing good about the war except in the lofty castle of blissful ignorance, the fool's paradise as you may call it in the colloquial way, that in the lofty castle of blissful ignorance of John's mother and the ones like her live in, there is nowhere that war can be regarded as something glorious, something valorous, something to look forward to. So in the above lines, what do we notice? That neither in her words nor in her thoughts was there a bit of sadness or a sense of grief. She is not sad that her son has departed from her and is there in some foreign land and probably will not return in a good shape. She was too proud to realize that the war was no game, and her firm belief that John Brown was going to return unscathed may be shattered. She does not realize that. She is still under that belief, probably due to the reasons as we got to know earlier about that political propaganda, or the people who are just under the belief that probably their son or their children are going to return safe and not boxed in a coffin. So that John Brown was going to return unscathed may be shattered. She does not realize that her son, this pride may be shattered, that her son may not be alive to come back home. Okay, so now we will move on to the second video. In the second video we will cover the next part, so just follow the link in the description section and we'll just go through this part very well before we move on to the next part. Okay, do stay tuned. Now we will start on with the next video in the following section.